Crossovers, one of the most popular fiction genres out there. Because what is better than one of your favorite settings? Two of your favorite settings smashed together. They offer a lot of potential and make you all giddy in regard to how things will turn out when the very reality is warped to accommodate the crossing between universes. That, or you are screaming at the screen, red face, furious that ability from one universe was presented as stronger than ability from another, or if a character from a universe you like a lot dies by the hand of a character from the universe you don't like so much. Ugh, by the gods! Why, oh why, most crossovers are trash? Wouldn't you like to know? Well, I will try my best to answer this great mystery in this video. But before we begin, remember to like, comment, subscribe, ring the bell, the whole shtick. You know what to do. If you can, support me through Patreon, where you get access to a lot of additional content. You can also send donations through Ko-fi, where I gather funds for art commissions for my Star Wars x Warhammer 40k series, so I encourage you to go there as well. Anyway, without further delay, let's begin. Let's address the biggest problem with many crossovers and crossover fanfictions. A plague, really. One that crushes creativity and accepts only the narrowest and shallowest exploration of a very concept of crossover. Most crossovers aren't, in fact, crossovers. Even though they might look like them and call themselves such. You know what most of such stories are? They are battles. People enjoy clashes. I would know. I gained hundreds of subscribers thanks to my versus videos. But those who actually saw them probably noticed one thing. I tried my best to focus on other aspects, rather than just pure clash of guns and blades. No, I at least tried to explore the clash of ideas, of perspectives, of technology and even politics. That's the first thing I wanted to tell you. Crossovers are more than just battles. They are clashes of more than just blades, but of ideas, technologies, biology, ideology, politics, and so much more. And people do enjoy them. People enjoy the deeper exploration, a multi-layered conflict that doesn't rely on combat alone. Combat, while interesting and action-driven, can be a bit shallow if it's the only aspect of a crossover you explore. Combat can also lock you out from exploring other aspects of a scenario, especially if you go with a total war scenario. Those kinds of stories could just as well be posts on forums. If you write a crossover, I encourage you to explore other aspects and show the impact of different ideas, technologies, and even faiths, changing the world. Show not only impact on the grand scale, but also on micro scale. Not just what kings and countries do, but how simple people living in the universe react to sudden and unexpected changes. Explore the story and interactions, and do not lock yourself in the total war scenario. Because at some point there will be nothing more to say but how another character fell to the ground dead. That's why crossovers, where you transport an existential threat from one universe to another, won't be interesting. There are only so many ways you can explore existential dread. and only so many ways you can counter the creatures that are heralds of doom. Take your pick. The Flood from Halo, the Tyranids from Warhammer 40k, the Brethren Moons from Dead Space. They limit the narrative. There are only so many ways you can face those things, only so many things to explore with them knocking at the door. The second point? A really big one. Power fantasy. A plague as big, if not bigger, and far more destructive than what we discussed before. Now, if you could humor me, I would ask you to change the way you are thinking. Don't think of crossovers as crossovers. Don't think of them as clashes of universes. Think of them as Isekai, a genre of anime, manga and light novels where the main character is reborn or transported to another world, usually sent there by the mercy of a fast-approaching truck with a dude behind the wheel who decided to text and drive. It makes sense when you think about it. The character in Isekai is crossing over to another universe. They use an unorthodox method of getting killed while doing so, but at its core, Isekai are crossovers. And the most common thing in Isekai is this. The main character, the person transported into the new reality, is laughably overpowered. From cheat codes, insane powers, to being over-leveled final boss in the tutorial area. Take your damn pick. Those kinds of stories are goddamn everywhere. You need to look hard to find a story where the aspect of power fantasy is missing, or even if the character is powerful, but their abilities are limited. There is a difference between a character that is strong and a Marisu. As you probably can figure out on your own, this is also something to keep in mind. Having one side being overly powerful is downright boring, because we all know the outcome. There are enough trash power fantasies in the world, let's not add to the list. And some of you might cry out, "Oh, but some universes have inherently powerful characters or factions." True. Here is a solution. Either balance them out, or do not write the story. I'm sorry to tell you, but some universes simply won't mix, no matter how much work you put into the story. Some stories simply operate on completely different rules, powers, abilities, even mentality. Just like oil and water don't mix, same can happen to stories. SpongeBob SquarePants vs Warhammer 40k might sound amusing, but I have a strange feeling that those two stories won't mix very well. You would need to change one or that other at their core to make this work. And in this case, I don't think you are writing a true crossover anymore. You are just writing a story that, for the sake of crossover, loses the core of being a crossover, of different universes meeting. That's why, in my opinion, crossovers work only when the stories are at least somewhat similar and work on similar rules and logic. The other solution is balance, which mostly relies on scale of things. If one universe operates on the lower scale of power, bring something from other universe that, even if powerful, won't be overpowered. If you can't bring the most powerful faction, bring only their expedition, or even a singular character. Balance things out. Here, I will give you an example. A crossover between Warhammer 40k and the Lord of the Rings. At first glance, insanity! How in the ever-loving hell something like this could work? Simple. Let's bring someone from 40k that will be fun to use, but while powerful, won't be insanely overpowered. Let's say a single Space Marine in damaged tower armor and equipment should be just fine for this example. Now, Space Marines are deadly, but without their power armor, without ability to repair it, with extremely limited ammunition, with no apothecary to heal them if something goes wrong. Suddenly, even a Space Marine with all their powers and abilities is not an unstoppable force. His potential is balanced out against the universe he finds himself in. A troll is without a doubt stronger than average orc, so they could potentially kill a Space Marine, especially one lacking their power armor. The same goes for hordes of Tolkien orcs and goblins. A death by 1,000 cats is still death. And if you want to look at higher power level, a standard marine has no real hope against something like a Barlork or a dragon. Even Nazgul can prove to be problematic. The ring itself might prove too much of a challenge. After all, we know that Space Marines aren't uncorruptible. Even though formidable, a single Space Marine without access to his equipment is very much vulnerable to threats in the Middle-earth. Take this example to heart. Two universes that, at first glance, couldn't mix. Can, if you give it a bit of thought and balance them out. Speaking of balance, let's talk about scale. As the name suggests, crossover implies crossing over of a limited number of people or elements from one universe to another. So, please, don't transport an entire galaxy next to another in order to have your perfect clash between everyone and everything. You might think that it's connected to power scaling, but it isn't. Your real problem is something different if you try something like that. It's overcrowding. A singular character from one universe interacting with another can be challenging enough. How the knowledge, experience, tools, technology and ideas of this single person could potentially influence the overworld are hard to predict and explore. If you throw two universes at each other, you lose the ability to track every plotline, story and character you've created. It's simply too much. You won't be able to keep track of it at all. Arrival of a single faction is problematic enough. Where do they end up? Who do they ally to? Who is their enemy? What is their new goal? You need to explore those questions in a crossover if you want it to make sense. Now imagine expanding to more factions. Old rivalries and new ones being mixed in the chaotic period when two universes try to figure out where they stand in the new reality. Some of those stories have dozens of writers exploring one universe. Do you really think you alone can match the output of two of such universes crashing? Hell, even if there is one writer per universe, that's still work of two people. Imagine if Westeros from Game of Thrones, universe of ice and fire, was transported, all lands, kingdoms and characters to sit right next to the Middle-earth. Where do you even begin with figuring out how those two realms interact with one another? So, my personal proposition: limit the amount of people, factions, forces, powers, whatever, that cross from one universe to the next. Scale it down. More doesn't always mean better. Final point. Being new in universe means you need to learn some things again from ground up. You need to find your footing. If you showed up in the new universe, you wouldn't adapt to it in a week. Confusion, struggle, cultural shock, the lack of ability to speak the language, not understanding cultural norms, having no friends, no idea where you are, and no contacts to help you, should influence the narrative. There should be a period of being a fish out of the water, no matter if it's a singular character or a faction. Sure, some characters and factions would adapt faster than others, or ignore adaptation in order to keep doing what they were doing, but sooner or later they will have to change their ways. They need to adapt to the world, and the world will have to somewhat adapt to them, although not as much as a newcomer will have to adapt to the world. On a similar note, the nature of those getting transported can't change overnight. Don't make them act out of character. A space marine in Middle-earth I mentioned before would probably struggle to figure out what happened, keep to protocols and traditions before he would realize that there is no coming back home and deciding what he wants to do in this universe. Hell, because of indoctrination, it would be harder for him to adapt compared to a simple guardsman. This can be explored as well. This period of adaptation, of adapting not only to your surroundings, but your own ideas and values to this new universe, will be important. For example, in modern world, killing is seen as something evil. But if you got transported into a fantasy medieval-like setting, where there are evil, sentient creatures, killing might become part of routine in order to simply survive in this new reality. Remember to explore this period, how the one who crossed adapted, changed, or how they intend to change the world because they are at their core opposed to something, and they will move heaven and earth to change the world. That can also be fun. I don't know about you, but if I ended up in a universe where slavery was common, I wouldn't be like hundreds of Isekai protagonists who buy slave girls to his harem. Screw that, that's disgusting. I'm going full John Brown, baby. Let's get that slave revolution going. God sent me to this universe to do two things: kill the slavers and free the slaves. So let's get to the bloody work. Sorry about that. Got a little bit into a character. No joke, I had an idea to write something like that in the past, because I was sick and tired of the isekai trope of main hero accepting slavery. But that's a story for another time. Let's get back on topic. So, those are 4 main things to watch out for. Remembering that crossover is not just about combat. Not making it a power fantasy. Keeping scale of a crossover in check. Remembering about period of adaptation to the new reality. I could end it here, but I would like to give you some examples of stories and crossovers where those mistakes were made, so that you can explore them on your own and think of how to avoid them. Let's start with over-focus on combat with Avengers vs X-Men comic series. The series had potential, the clash of ideologies, of duty, of heroes, but it was all forgotten for the sake of setting up battles between heroes. That's it. The nuance, the potential was lost for the sake of combat and the rule of cool. They could have made it into another Avengers Civil War, where conflict of ideology was just as important, if not more, than combat. To make deep exploration of what's right and what's wrong, and how perspectives change the meaning of events. But no, heroes beating the ever-loving crap out of each other is far more interesting than that. A shame, really. Next, power fantasy. I could choose almost any isekai, but I choose Gate. An anime and manga where a gate to another world showed up in Japan and Japanese military responded in force. So we have modern military versus Roman legions and some fantasy creatures that can't handle modern weaponry. Gate is a special example, because not only Japan military is overpowered, not only main character is extremely skilled and lucky soldier, not only are their enemies incompetent, not only many powerful characters from this universe join forces with the Japanese, but also the whole series is goddamn propaganda. I am not making this up. The author of the story is downright nationalist pro-military shill. Go watch Gate for yourself. It will be entertaining for a while, but you quickly will realize that there are little to no stakes, because Japanese military is so amazing and so great and so noble, and they never do anything wrong. Not now, and most definitely not in the past. Wink wink. I swear I saw less pro-military propaganda in base Transformers. Now, scale. Want an example of overload of characters, ideas, powers and other elements? Ready Player One. Good lord, so many missed opportunities. On one hand, there is a singular narrated story, and there is a little crossing between universes, but characters from different games and movies show up en masse, and yet their exploration of their abilities, powers, etc. is extremely limited and mostly to combat scenarios. It's just fan service cameo after fan service cameo. No real substance there. It's better to have one character explored properly than throw 500 that aren't explored at all. Next, no adaptation to New World? Like almost none at all? Michael Bay's Transformers in general. They land on our planet, refugees or invaders, and they barely adapt to our world. They know our language thanks to internet. They know our customs, our slang, etc. The peak of their adaptation is taking shape of our cars, which is a bit shallow. I know they look like machines, but they are cybernetic life forms with their own culture, traditions, language, etc. And yet, this is barely explored. Same for their extremely long lifespans. Why is that not explored and not discussed in greater detail? Why don't we see the exploration of how Transformers truly struggle to adapt to their life among the humans, to a planet so drastically different to their own? Sure, there is conflict between them and governments, but that's mostly political in nature. Bayverse Transformers is where the world adapts to newcomers, not the other way around, which can be very disappointing. Now, you want to see an example of a good crossover? Of a good story where the problems I described before are avoided? Hunter or Huntress by Tigra21. A story of Danish veteran and engineer who gets an offer to travel to a different world. After some preparations and gathering of resources, tools and knowledge, he does, ending up in a world of dragons, dragonettes and floating islands. And I will tell you now, if you didn't read or listen to this story, you do yourself disservice. We have everything here. The crossover isn't about battle, it's about relationship, adventure and adaptation to new reality, but also about introducing human technology to this medieval setting. The main character has access to guns, but he isn't used to flying enemies who try to cut him in half with a sword, or dragons that can shoot lightning. Dragons especially are a bit out of his league. He brought only what a Danish civilian could buy as a weapon, so his arsenal is limited. He comes alone to the universe, keeping scale contained to, for the most part, a single island and single keep. He did bring some technology, but not the entire caravan of trinkets and wonders from another world. He will need to use his engineering skill to actually build tools and machines in this new world from the ground up. He needs time to adapt to the new reality, learn the language, traditions, convictions, code of honor, and so forth. And the universe must adapt to the introduction of human technology. Adaptation goes two ways here, but most importantly, above everything else, there are consequences for his actions, good and bad. And that's the most important thing. That story that can be equally breathtaking and heart-shattering. You will cry and you will laugh in equal measure. There is love, intrigue, treachery, combat, adventure, and a lot of amusing situations, where human understanding of the world clashes with this fantastical world. If you want to get inspired regarding how to write crossovers well, Tigra21 and his story are a great place to start. He has sure inspired me more than once. And I think that's about it for today. If you enjoyed this video, remember to like, comment, subscribe and ring that bell. If you can, support me through Patreon or Ko-fi. I would appreciate it very much. Thank you for joining me and I hope you enjoyed. Now, my dear viewers and listeners, remember, wherever you are, whatever you do, try to enjoy yourself while you can. I wish you most heretical day. Ta-ta!